My ex-husband forced me to sign divorce papers the very moment I was holding an ultrasound photo of our twins, just so he wouldn't be late for a tuxedo fitting with the daughter of a real estate billionaire. Exactly 5 years later, at our college reunion, as he stood at the pinnacle of corporate power and mocked me for being a pathetic loser, it took nothing more than a single word from my 2 children to drag his CEO title and his billion-dollar marriage into the mud. How did I, a seemingly penniless single mother, manage to so thoroughly and ruthlessly crush a traitor and strip him of everything? I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped into the VIP lounge of the Apex Room, a 5-star restaurant in downtown Chicago. As the clock struck exactly 7:30 p.m., the air inside was already thick with the scent of bespoke cologne, acrid cigar smoke, and fake, polished laughter. It had been 5 years since I left the university with a degree in economics. The once sacred concept of a young alumni mixer had devolved into an invisible battlefield. The perceived losers timidly backed into the corners, while those who had achieved any measure of success tripped over each other to show off keys to Teslas and Porsches, limited edition Birkin bags, or job titles embossed in gold foil on heavy cardstock. I pulled out an empty chair in the furthest corner, right next to a heavy, burgundy velvet drape that cascaded from the ceiling. I wore a simple, form-fitting black silk dress. No jewelry. My hair was pulled back into a neat chignon. 5 long years of being a single mother, raising twins entirely on my own in a magnificent but unforgiving city like Chicago, had honed my ability to mask my emotions flawlessly. I took a sip of sparkling water, coldly observing the tasteless social comedy playing out before me. I wouldn't have come at all, but the alumni chapter president had called me countless times, begging me to attend, insisting that the 5-year milestone required the entire graduating class to be present. Just as the chapter president raised his glass to give a welcome speech, the carved mahogany doors of the VIP room were suddenly pushed open from the outside. No knock, just pure, unadulterated arrogance. All 30 people in the room fell silent instantly. Every eye darted to the threshold. The man who walked in wasn't staff. He was dressed in a custom-tailored, ash-gray 3-piece suit that fit his tall frame immaculately. His nose was straight, his hair flawlessly swept back without a single strand out of place. On his left wrist gleamed a Patek Philippe watch worth more than a decent condo in the Loop. He walked with an unhurried, predatory stride, sweeping his cold, sharp gaze across the room like a monarch inspecting his subjects. My heart skipped a beat, then began to hammer against my ribs. The hand holding my water glass tightened until my knuckles turned white. It was Vance, my ex-husband, the man who, 5 years ago in the pouring rain, threw a divorce petition in my face with the cruelest words imaginable. "With you, I'll always be a mid-level clerk. I need an empire, Sloan, and you can't give me that." The alumni president reacted first. He practically vaulted over a table, rushing toward the door and bending over backward with a sycophantic smile that sent shivers down my spine. "My God, Vance! Mr. Sterling! What good wind brought a CEO of your stature here? We didn't think you'd be able to tear yourself away from the Harrington Group." "What an honor. Please, come take the center seat." "My apologies, everyone," Vance said, his voice calm and dripping with authority. "The board of directors meeting ran longer than expected, and then my wife insisted I take her shopping on the Magnificent Mile. I barely convinced her to head home. I'm late, so the entire tab is on me tonight. Order whatever you'd like." A collective gasp of admiration and loud applause erupted. Former classmates swarmed Vance like moths to a flame. Someone poured him a vintage cognac. Another pulled out a plush armchair. They practically tripped over themselves asking about his billion-dollar development projects, praising his wife, the heiress to a real estate empire, whom he mentioned with undisguised smugness. Vance sat in the center, lit a cigar, blew out a plume of white smoke, and occasionally nodded at the flattery with a half-smile playing on his lips. I remained seated in my dark corner. My breathing gradually returned to normal. I had avoided him for 5 years. And now fate had orchestrated our meeting in this confined space. I reached for my clutch, planning to slip out under the pretense of a sick babysitter. I wasn't afraid of him. The thought of sharing oxygen with this bastard simply made me nauseous. But the moment I shifted, Vance's gaze slid toward my corner behind the drape. His movement, just as he was bringing the cigar to his lips, froze. Through the haze of smoke, I saw his eyes narrow, and then a venomous, cruel smirk slowly spread across his face. He crushed the cigar into an ashtray and tapped his finger adorned with a diamond wedding band against the glass tabletop. Well, well. Look who's sitting over there. If I'm not mistaken, that's the former star of our graduating class. Vance's voice cut through the chatter. Sloane? Why are you hiding in the corner? It's been a long time. I barely recognized you. 30 pairs of eyes immediately snapped toward me. An oppressive silence descended on the room. None of our college friends knew that Vance and I had once been married and hastily divorced. We had eloped right after graduation, had a quiet courthouse ceremony, and the marriage imploded before we even had a chance to announce it to our wider circle. To them, Vance was just showing attention to an old acquaintance. But the two of us knew that every word he spoke was a barrage of invisible knives aimed straight at my chest. I maintained a perfectly neutral expression. Without standing up or breaking eye contact, I looked right through him. Hello, Mr. Sterling. You have such a heavy workload, yet your memory remains sharp. I just don't like the noise. I'm sitting in the corner for some peace and quiet. Peace and quiet? Vance laughed loudly. The sound echoed through the room, carrying undisguised humiliation. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and slowly walked toward me. In college, you were so proud. Men lined up for you, and you wouldn't even give them the time of day. I heard the last few years have been rough on you. Surviving all alone as a single mom? What's the matter? Your looks haven't completely faded yet. How come you haven't found a better meal ticket in 5 years? Or are your demands too high? Your ego is so inflated that everyone runs away in terror. A few snickers erupted from the women who used to envy me. The chapter president, seeing the tension spiking, tried to intervene, but Vance stopped him with a sharp wave of his hand. His gaze looked down on me from his towering height, as if he were a god looking at a pathetic ant in the mud. He wanted to prove a point to me. Look at you. Without me, you are a destitute loser. And I, by discarding you, gained the world. I curled my lips into a cynical smile and slowly stood up. The heels of my black stilettos made a sharp, cold clack against the hardwood floor. I only came up to his chin, but my gaze didn't tilt upward. I looked straight into the cowardice he was desperately trying to hide behind his bespoke shell. A meal ticket, Vance, can be a feast or a poison, depending on how you eat it. Some people prefer delicacies, but they have to spend their lives on their knees, licking someone else's boots to get them. I'd rather cook myself a simple bowl of pasta earned with my own sweat and tears. At least I sleep soundly at night, without jolting awake from shame and emasculation. So, I find my current life incredibly valuable. At the very least, it's worth more than the life of someone who sold his spine for a corner office. Vance's face changed instantly. The smug redness drained away, leaving him a sickly, dead white. The veins at his temples throbbed. My words had struck his Achilles heel, the ultimate humiliation he endured, by becoming the kept son-in-law of a ruthless billionaire. He ground his teeth and took a step forward, blocking my path. You still have a sharp tongue. Still the same stubborn, foolish nature. Let's see how long you survive in Chicago with an attitude like that. An ungrateful bitch like you deserves to rot at the bottom of the food chain. I gripped my clutch tighter, preparing to fire back, when suddenly, the heavy doors of the VIP lounge burst open again. Mommy! Mom! Two ringing, crystal-clear children's voices pierced the thick, hostile atmosphere. Everyone in the room, including Vance, whipped their heads toward the door. Standing, there were two children. A little boy in a miniature plaid button-down shirt was firmly holding the hand of a little girl in a pristine white dress, a bright red bow pinned in her hair. Two beautiful, fair-skinned, slightly chubby children who looked like 2 drops of water. But what made all 30 people in the room collectively hold their breath, afraid to even exhale, were their faces. Dark, slightly almond-shaped eyes, a strong, straight nose, thin lips. They were a perfect, terrifyingly exact carbon copy of the CEO standing in the middle of the room. Kieran and Harper weren't frightened by the crowd. Spotting me, they let go of each other and practically skipped toward my corner. Harper threw herself directly into my legs, hugging my knees tightly and pouting. Mommy, Miss Delaney took forever in the bathroom. We waited in the lobby and asked the front desk lady where your room was. We missed you. Kieran was more reserved. He stood beside me, his small hands grasping the hem of my dress. His clear but incredibly guarded eyes scanned the room, eventually locking onto the tall man standing directly in front of his mother. I crouched down, wrapping one arm around Harper and stroking Kieran's hair with the other. My nose stung, but I forced the tears down, refusing to let a single one fall. I had asked the babysitter to wait in the ground floor play area. I hadn't expected these two little rascals to navigate their way up here on their own. Slowly straightening up, I looked right at Vance. He was petrified. His entire body had turned to stone. His eyes were blown wide open, staring unblinking at the children. His chest heaved violently. His breathing became ragged and shallow, like a man drowning. The hand sporting the Patek Philippe shook so violently he had to interlock his fingers, but even that couldn't hide his absolute panic. These children. Vance's voice was hoarse, cracking horribly. It sounded like the groan of someone being strangled. He took a half-step backward, tripped over the leg of a sofa, and nearly went down. A frantic whispering erupted in the room, buzzing like a disturbed beehive. People were pointing, covering their mouths in shock. The biological resemblance was an ironclad piece of evidence that no one could deny. I gently pushed Kieran and Harper slightly behind me, straightened my spine, and lifted my chin to witness his total collapse. Yes. Allow me to introduce you. Mr. Sterling. These are my children. How old are they? Vance asked, his eyes practically glued to little Kieran's face. His lips trembled as he waited for the answer. Vance repeated it like a madman. His pupils contracted into tiny pinpricks. How could a seasoned, cutthroat businessman like him fail to solve this simple math problem? 5 years ago, the very night he forced me out, minus 9 months of pregnancy. The timeline was exact to the minute. Vance suddenly lunged forward, extending a hand as if he wanted to touch Harper's cheek. Sloan, why? Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? Why did you hide this from me? I stepped back, slapping his hand away in midair. My gaze was as cold as a glacier. Why? To get in the way of your corporate ascent? Don't worry about it. For 5 years, I carried them, birthed them, and raised them entirely on my own. On their birth certificates, the space for the father is left blank. From the night you walked out that door to crawl into another woman's bed, these children permanently ceased to have anything to do with you. Suddenly, little Kieran tilted his head up. His dark eyes, inherited from the man standing before him, gleamed with a cold, detached ruthlessness. The little boy frowned, pointed a tiny finger directly at Vance, and articulated clearly, "Mom, who is this guy? Why is he looking at you like that? And why did he try to touch Harper? I don't like him. He's a bad man. This guy." The phrase, spoken by his own biological son, delivered a devastating psychological blow to Vance. He staggered back 2 full steps. His face was as pale as a sheet, drained of every ounce of blood. His mouth hung open, but he couldn't form a single word of defense. I smiled softly, patted my son's head, and said loudly, deliberately, so every single person in the VIP room could hear, "Just a stranger, sweetheart. Let's go home and get you to bed." I took my children by the hands and turned decisively toward the exit. Left in my wake were the stunned, gaping faces of 30 college alumni and the trembling, ruined figure of a billionaire CEO clinging to the edge of a table for support. But I knew that the appearance of Kieran and Harper tonight had activated a ticking time bomb, and the people who had trampled us 5 years ago were about to pay a price so exorbitant they couldn't possibly fathom it. The heavy oak doors of the VIP lounge clicked shut, entirely cutting off the roar of gossip that was beginning to boil over like a kettle left on a high flame. The clack-clack of my heels against the cold marble floor of the restaurant corridor was rhythmic, confident, and utterly devoid of fear. I squeezed my children's hands. Their tiny frames contained the immense power that held my entire universe together. I didn't regret revealing the truth for a second. Hide? Why should I hide? I hadn't cheated. I hadn't stolen. And I certainly hadn't abandoned my own flesh and blood for the sake of hollow prestige. Letting Vance see them was merely a phantom slap to his laughable arrogance. But I also knew a man as vain and desperate as Vance wouldn't let this go. Just as I predicted, right as the 3 of us reached the elevator bank, frantic, stumbling footsteps echoed behind us. "Sloan! Stop! Stop!" I said. Vance's shout shattered the refined silence of the luxury hotel. A few concierges standing nearby flinched and turned around. I stopped and slowly pivoted. Vance was sprinting toward me like a cornered animal, His bespoke suit, which had looked flawless 30 minutes ago, was heavily creased. He had violently loosened his silk tie. His face was flushed purple, either from the cognac or sheer, unadulterated shock. He was panting heavily, stopping just a few feet from us. His frantic eyes darted between Kieran and Harper's faces before locking onto mine. It was a chaotic mix of shock, indignation, and raw terror. Kieran instinctively stepped in front of his sister, throwing his little arms wide as if to shield her, his dark eyes glaring defiantly at the unhinged man. Harper pressed her face into my thigh, her little fist clutching my dress. These children. Explain it to me right now. When were they born? How dared you hide something like this from me, Sloane? They're both mine. Aren't they? Answer me! Vance's voice cracked. He threw his hands up as if he wanted to grab my shoulders, but he froze midway, colliding with my sub-zero glare. I put my hands protectively on my children's shoulders, gently smoothing Kieran's hair to calm him down, before raising my chin to look the man in the eye. Mr. Sterling, we are in a public place. Please maintain some dignity. You are frightening my children. What fucking dignity? Vance practically roared, though he immediately dropped his volume when he noticed a security guard stepping forward in the distance. You gave birth to my kids. You carried my blood for 5 years and didn't say a goddamn word. And now you want to lecture me about dignity? Do you realize you've committed something monstrous? You stole my right to fatherhood. I laughed. The laughter bubbled up from the very bottom of my soul, laced with bitter, absolute contempt. Monstrous? A man who ruthlessly kicked his pregnant wife out onto the street in a torrential downpour so he could move a billionaire's daughter into his bed, now has the audacity to call me monstrous? Right to fatherhood. I curled my lip, each word acting like a razor blade slicing through his pathetic logic. On what grounds are you demanding fatherhood here? From the perspective of a man who forced his wife to sign a divorce settlement so he could make a tuxedo fitting? Or from the perspective of the guy who, not 10 minutes ago, publicly mocked me as a loser who couldn't find a meal ticket? I leaned in slightly. Listen closely, Vance. The birth certificates say, Mother, Sloane Kensington. They carry my last name. With my own flesh, my own youth, and my own life on the operating table, I brought them into this world. They are mine. Solely mine. You are nothing but a cowardly sperm donor who ran away. Do not stand here and demand privileges you never earned. You've lost your mind, Vance stammered, taking a half step back. My fury and titanium-clad logic acted like a bucket of ice water, washing away the veneer of power he had so meticulously cultivated. You hid them because you hate me. You want to use them to get back at me. Sloane, don't be so childish. Look at yourself. A single mom living paycheck to paycheck. What can you possibly give 2 kids to ensure a good life? You're keeping them just so they can suffer in poverty with you. Give them to me. I have money now. I have status. I can put them in the Latin School of Chicago. They can live in a mansion in Winnetka. Before Vance could finish his delusional fantasy, I held up a hand, silencing him. Shut up. My voice was a lethal whisper. Do you honestly think your money can buy everything? It might have bought your spine, but it will never buy my children. The Latin school? A mansion? You plan to drag my children into your house so they can call the woman who stole their mother's husband mom? You want children of your blood to live their lives cowering in the shadows of your billionaire in-laws? I scoffed. Stop lying to yourself, Vance. Are you worried about the children, or are you just terrified? Terrified that this secret will get out and the CEO title your father-in-law gifted you will vanish into thin air? Terrified that your heiress wife will toss you onto the street with nothing but the clothes on your back if she finds out you have 2 illegitimate kids? Vance's flushed face instantly turned chalk white. Every syllable I spoke hammered directly into the darkest, most cowardly corner of his psyche. His wife, Blair Harrington, the notoriously volatile heiress to a massive Chicago real estate empire, was famous for her despotic, jealous nature. She married him because he was handsome, compliant, and seemingly came with no baggage. She would never accept a man with living, breathing proof of a previous life. Vance knew this perfectly well. He didn't want custody out of paternal love. He wanted it out of possessive panic. He needed to control this dangerous variable before it destroyed his empire. Are you threatening me? He breathed. I don't have time to threaten you. I'm warning you. The elevator chimed, and the polished steel doors slid open. I guided Kieran and Harper inside and pressed the button for the parking garage. Just before the doors closed, I looked directly into Vance's bloodshot eyes and delivered the final blow to his illusions. My children and I live a very peaceful life. If you dare take a single step into it, I swear to God, you will taste the loss of everything you worship. Remember, Vance, you have everything to lose. I have nothing. Goodbye, Mr. Sterling. The doors shut, leaving Vance standing in the lobby in total, paralyzing horror. I watched his figure disappear in the narrowing gap and finally let out a long exhale. Only now did the exhaustion wash over my body. The tension of the last 30 minutes had drained my adrenaline. "Mommy, is that man bad?" Harper asked, looking up with her huge, innocent eyes. Kieran gripped my hand tightly and declared, "If that guy tries to be mean to you, Mom, I'll punch him. I'll protect you." I smiled, dropping to one knee on the cold elevator floor, and pulled both my angels into a tight embrace. My nose stung again, but I was resolutely determined not to cry. I had shed my last tear over that man 5 years ago. Everything is fine, my loves. As long as Mom is here, no one will ever hurt us. Let's go get some ice cream, and then we'll go home and sleep tight. I pulled out my phone, quickly texting the babysitter to meet us at the lobby entrance, adding a generous tip to her Venmo for the trouble. I picked Harper up and, holding Kieran's hand, walked out toward the waiting Uber. The shadows of the three of us stretched long across the concrete. I knew tonight's battle was only the opening salvo. Vance wouldn't give up, or rather, his massive ego and survival instincts would force him to do something desperate. But I wasn't afraid. The weak girl who only knew how to cry and beg had died in a thunderstorm 5 years ago. Standing here today was a mother, a warrior, ready to obliterate anyone who dared touch her children. The Uber glided through the quiet nighttime streets of Chicago. The city lights blurred into streaks of amber and crimson against the rain-streaked window. I held my sleeping children close, allowing the agonizing memories of that rainy night 5 years ago to slowly surface, as sharp and vivid as if it happened yesterday. It had been raining unseasonably hard that night, too. The drumming of the drops against the glass sent a chill down my spine. Memory is a cruel master. You think you've buried it under 1,000 layers of time, but it only takes one drop of rain, one familiar sound, for it to sprout again, tearing your soul open. 5 years ago, Vance and I were both 25. We had been college sweethearts. Our love was pure and penniless, fueled by the naive optimism of youth. After graduation, despite our family's protests, we had a quick courthouse wedding in our Midwest hometown and moved to Chicago to conquer the world. We rented a miserable, leaky basement apartment in Pilsen. In the summer, it was a humid oven. When it rained, the ceiling wept and water pooled under our secondhand mattress. But I didn't care. I worked as a junior accountant at a small logistics firm, and Vance was a sales rep for a construction materials company. In the evenings, I would take the L train home, stop at the discount grocery store, buy some cheap ground beef and vegetables, cook a hot meal, and wait for him. I foolishly believed that if we just grinded hard enough, one day we'd buy a little condo, have beautiful kids, and build a real home. I was wrong. Poverty didn't destroy my love, but it annihilated the last shreds of Vance's conscience and self-respect. About 6 months before the divorce, Vance began to change. He left early and came home late. He always smelled of expensive scotch and designer women's perfume. He started complaining that my dinners were bland, that our apartment was a rat hole, and that my clothes looked like they belonged on a farm girl. I tried to endure it, telling myself it was just the stress of his demanding sales quotas. The climax arrived on that fateful, stormy night. That afternoon, I had taken half a day off to go to the OB/GYN clinic. The doctor, looking at the ultrasound monitor, had smiled warmly. "Congratulations, Mrs. Sterling. It's twins. 2 gestational sacs, 2 strong, healthy heartbeats." Holding the ultrasound strip, I sobbed with pure joy. All the resentment and exhaustion of the past 6 months vanished. I rushed home, bought a small bouquet of grocery store flowers, cooked a beautiful pot roast his favorite, and waited. I wanted to surprise him. I genuinely believed that the arrival of 2 little angels would bring back the warm, loving husband he used to be. 10 o'clock. 11. Midnight. The roast was cold. The storm outside intensified, thunder rattling our cheap windows. Lightning slashed across the sky. Finally, the lock clicked. Vance walked in. He didn't take off his wet Italian leather shoes. He just tracked mud right into the center of the room. He didn't smell like alcohol. He exuded a terrifying, sober, clinical calmness. He looked at the cold dinner on the table, then at me, standing there with my hands hiding the ultrasound photo behind my back. There was no emotion on his face. He reached into his briefcase and tossed a thick stack of papers onto the rickety wooden table. "Sign it." I froze. The ultrasound paper crumpled in my trembling grip. I walked over and looked down. The bold, capitalized words "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage and Marital Settlement Agreement" burned my retinas. The room spun. "Vance, what is this? Is this a joke? We're fine." "Who told you we're fine?" Vance barked, ripping off his tie and throwing it over a chair. "I am sick to death of this pathetic, poverty-stricken life. I'm sick of the smell of cheap cooking oil in your hair. I'm sick of this leaking rat hole. I'm sick of counting pennies for rent every month. I'm a man. I have ambitions. What can you possibly do to help me get to the top, other than cooking me a goddamn pot roast?" I stood paralyzed. My entire body shook. His words were serrated blades carving out my heart. "Is there someone else?" I choked out. Vance didn't dodge the question. He lifted his chin, his eyes filled with a ruthless thirst for power. "Yes, she's the only daughter of the chairman of the Harrington Group. She loves me. She can give me a vice president title overnight. She can give me a penthouse, a Porsche. She can give me things that you, even if you sold your soul, could never provide. Her family is flying in from New York next week to discuss the wedding. I can't wait anymore. Let's end this." I stared at the man standing before me. A stranger. Cruel and irredeemably vile. He was openly auctioning off 7 years of love and loyalty for wealth and prestige. The hand hiding the ultrasound shook violently. A second ago, I wanted to scream at him. "We are having babies. Aren't you afraid of going to hell for this?" But looking into his dead, calculating eyes, reality struck me like a physical blow. If I told him about the twins, what would he do? A man willing to trample his wife to climb the corporate ladder, would he let 2 illegitimate kids ruin his billionaire wedding? He would force me into an abortion. Or worse, that powerful family would use their army of lawyers to rip the babies away from me and throw me back onto the street. No, never. My children. I would protect them myself. A parasite so hungry for status was never worthy of being their father. Vance reached into his tailored suit jacket and pulled out an envelope. He slid a cashier's check across the table. "There's $50,000 here. Consider it compensation for your youth. It's enough for you to find a new apartment and live comfortably for a while. Take it, sign the papers, pack your bags, and leave tonight. Don't make this difficult." I looked at the crisp, bank-issued check resting on top of the divorce papers. $50,000. 7 years of my youth, my absolute devotion, my sacrifices appraised and bought out for 50 grand. I smiled, a broken, chilling smile that made Vance frown in confusion. I slowly reached out and picked up a pen from the table. My hand had stopped shaking. I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of my pride and fury into the tip of the ballpoint pen, and signed my name on the respondent line with a vicious slash. I slid the papers back to him. Then, I picked up the cashier's check and threw it directly into his face. The heavy paper fluttered down and landed in a puddle of muddy rainwater he had tracked in. "Take your filthy money and buy yourself a crown. My youth is priceless. You don't have enough to compensate me for it. From this second on, we are dead to each other." I turned around, grabbed a small duffel bag with a few sets of cheap office clothes, threw on a thin raincoat, and walked out the door. The rain lashed at my face, the biting wind chilling me to the bone. I walked alone into the Chicago night, one hand gripping my bag, the other firmly clutching my still flat stomach. My tears mixed with the rain, salty and bitter. That night, standing under the roaring, lightning-streaked sky, I made a vow. I swore to God I would survive. I would birth these children and raise them to be proud, unbreakable people. And if that traitor ever dared to cross my path again, I would make him pay for his depravity in blood. The Uber jerked to a stop outside my condo building, snapping me out of my memories. I gathered a sleeping Harper into my arms and held Kieran's hand as we got out. It wasn't raining in Chicago tonight. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I knew, starting tomorrow, a Category 5 hurricane was going to hit my front door. 3 days had passed since the explosive night at the Apex room. 3 days since I threw my old SIM card in the trash, severing all ties with my college alumni network. I knew that with Vance's money and corporate connections, finding my home address or the kids' preschool was only a matter of time. But I wasn't hiding. I went to work as usual, dropped off and picked up the kids, mentally bracing for the inevitable confrontation. The Oak Park Sunshine Academy sat nestled at the end of a quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac. That afternoon, the sky over Chicago was overcast. The autumn wind rustled the maples. I pulled up on my reliable Vespa scooter at exactly 4:30 p.m. The moment I turned onto the street, I saw it. A sleek, black Mercedes Maybach parked illegally, taking up half the drop-off lane. The appearance of a six-figure luxury car outside a modest, middle-class preschool immediately drew stares from parents and locals. Standing nearby was Mrs. Higgins, the 60-year-old neighborhood crossing guard. She had been working this corner for a decade and knew every parent and child by face. From her perspective, the events of that afternoon played out like a daytime soap opera. As I parked my scooter, my blood hit a rolling boil. Vance was standing by the wrought iron gate, clutching the bars, desperately trying to use massive, expensive toys to lure my terrified children out from behind their teacher's legs. Seeing me, Miss Delaney, the teacher, looked like a massive weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She quickly picked Harper up and guided Kieran a few steps back. I strode toward the gate, slamming my helmet down onto the scooter's seat. Vance. What kind of circus are you trying to put on here? Vance flinched and whipped around. A flash of pure panic crossed his face, but he quickly reassembled his arrogant veneer. He adjusted his designer glasses and smoothed his lapels. Sloan. You're here. I just came to visit the children. It's been 3 days. You changed your number and quit your old job. I had to hire a private investigator just to find this school. Look, I brought them limited edition Lego sets. All kids love these. I glanced at the 2 massive, ridiculously expensive boxes abandoned on the sidewalk, then looked straight into the face of the self-proclaimed father. Do you think your plastic toys mean a damn thing here? Open your eyes. You terrified them. Miss Delaney, please take Kieran and Harper back inside for a moment. Do not let any strangers near them. The teacher nodded and quickly ushered my kids back into the building. Once they were out of sight, I turned back to Vance. Other parents were already lingering, whispering to each other. Mrs. Higgins was practically leaning over the crosswalk to eavesdrop. I couldn't care less. I wasn't the one who should feel ashamed. You hired a PI to stalk us. The CEO of a major real estate firm acting like a degenerate creep. I warned you at the restaurant. Don't you dare speak to me like that, Vance hissed, stepping closer and dropping his voice to avoid the eavesdroppers. Creep? You hid my flesh and blood from me for 5 years. You forced them to go to this cramped, mediocre school wearing cheap clothes from Target. You think this makes you noble, Sloan? Wake up. Look at the car I drive. Look at the suit I'm wearing. I can transfer them to the best bilingual private school in the state. A chauffeur can drive them every day. The trusts I can set up will ensure they never have to work a day in their lives. You're a mother. How can you rob your own kids of a brilliant future just to satisfy your own bitter ego? Vance's speech was polished, like a rehearsed sales pitch. In his warped mind, cash was an omnipotent deity. He used money to buy his status, and now he thought he could buy familial love. He thought he could write a check for the fatherhood he had thrown in the garbage 5 years ago. I crossed my arms over my chest and let out a laugh. The sound cut through the gloomy afternoon air, bitter and laden with pure sarcasm. A brilliant future? What exactly do you call a brilliant future, Vance? Wearing cashmere but having to call a stranger mom? Inheriting real estate but living in constant terror of being rejected by your billionaire wife's family? You forgot one very simple concept. I took a step forward, drilling my freezing gaze into his eyes, watching his fake authority crumble. When a child grows up, they need a mother who stays awake at 3:00 a.m., holding a cold compress to their forehead when their fever spikes to 104. They need someone holding their hands when they take their first steps. 5 years ago, when I was sitting in the ER in the middle of the night while they vomited on my shirt, where were you? When I was counting loose change to buy formula, where were you? I leaned in closer. Oh, right. You were busy wearing bespoke suits, driving luxury cars, and crawling on your knees to fluff your rich wife's skirt. So what if my kids wear cheap clothes? They are clean, and they smell like sunshine. So what if they go to a normal public school? The teachers here love them, and they learn to say please and thank you. They are proud, well-adjusted human beings. And you? You're dripping in designer labels, but inside, you reek of cowardice and betrayal. What the hell could you possibly teach my children? Vance choked on his rage. His face turned a violent shade of magenta from the sheer humiliation. He raised a hand. It looked like he wanted to slap me, but froze when he noticed Mrs. Higgins and a school security guard glaring at him. He slowly lowered his arm, balling his hand into a tight fist. Say whatever you want. Blood is blood. That cannot be changed, he seethed. They have my DNA, and the law recognizes my paternal rights. If you don't cooperate, I will take you to family court for full custody. With my financial resources, no judge in Illinois is going to give 2 kids to a low-income single mother when they can have everything with me. There it was, his final trump card, using the legal system and his immense wealth to terrorize a mother. Perhaps, if it were another, weaker woman in my shoes, she would have collapsed to her knees, weeping and begging. But Vance had fatally misjudged his opponent. He still thought I was the naive, submissive college girl he tossed away. I didn't flinch. I merely tilted my head, looking at him with profound pity. Take me to court? Perfect. Be my guest. What did you just say? I said, take me to court, file the petition, hire the most expensive sharks in Chicago. I smiled sweetly. But, Vance, before you file that paperwork, think very carefully. The moment the docket goes public, the Chicago Tribune will have a field day. Real estate CEO ruthlessly abandons pregnant wife for billionaire heiress. What will happen to Harrington Group's stock price? Your father-in-law, a man obsessed with his pristine public image, what will he do to his shameless bastard of a son-in-law? And your current wife? Do you honestly believe Blair Harrington is going to let you bring 2 bastard kids into her mansion to split her inheritance? Vance's face instantly went paper white. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. My words were poisoned needles piercing his most vulnerable organs. Vance was afraid of losing the kids, but he was 10,000 times more terrified of losing his CEO chair and his unearned fortune. Do you think I'm an idiot? I continued softly. You don't want custody because you love them. You're just obsessed with the liability they represent. You're terrified they'll threaten your fake gold-plated life. You want to hide them away under your control to shut me up. But you miscalculated. I will never give you my kids, and I don't want a single penny of your filthy money. If you ever dare come near this school again, I will personally FedEx the medical records of my twin pregnancy and that divorce petition from 5 years ago directly to your father-in-law's desk. Let's see who ends up with absolutely nothing in this game. Without waiting to watch his face turn from chalk to gray, I spun on my heel and walked into the school courtyard. By the curb, Vance stood rooted to the pavement like a clay statue someone had dumped a bucket of water over. His eyes were wide with terror as he stared at my back. His fists were clenched so hard his nails bit into his palms, but he couldn't utter a single threat. A moment later, he practically threw himself into his Maybach, slammed the door, and sped off in a cloud of exhaust, leaving behind the judgmental glares of the neighborhood. I picked up Kieran and Harper from Miss Delaney. The children hugged my neck tightly. I strapped their little helmets on, started the Vespa, and merged into the heavy late-afternoon traffic. The cool wind whipped through my hair. My chest felt tight, yet at the same time, I felt an incredible, soaring sense of freedom. I had won the first battle by cutting off Vance's retreat, but I knew the true hurricane was still gathering off the coast. Evening settled over our 900-square-foot, 2-bedroom condo in Lincoln Square. It wasn't massive, but I had made it a sanctuary of light and greenery. In the corner of the living room stood a large bookshelf overflowing with fairy tales, and a soft rug where the kids usually wrestled with their toys. Everything in this house breathed tranquility, an atmosphere of absolute safety I had painstakingly built over 5 years to shield them from the storms of life. But tonight, a tiny hairline fracture had appeared in our bubble. After a dinner of grilled salmon and quinoa, Kieran and Harper didn't run to the living room to watch cartoons. Harper, clutching her stuffed bear, followed me into the kitchen and stood in the doorway, watching me load the dishwasher. Kieran sat at the kitchen island, resting his chin on his hands, staring intensely at the condensation dripping down a glass of water. Children are far more perceptive than adults realize, especially twins raised by a single mother. They have invisible antennae that pick up on their mother's anxiety. The incident at the restaurant and today's confrontation at the school couldn't be easily brushed off by 5-year-olds. I dried my hands, took off my apron, and walked over. I picked Harper up and sat on a stool next to Kieran. I knew it was time to answer the questions I had always feared most. My treasures, what's wrong tonight? Was the salmon overcooked? Or was someone mean at school? Harper buried her face in my neck and whispered, "Mommy, that man in the big black car today. Who is he? Why does he know my name and Kieran's name? He brought big toys. But I'm scared of him." I gently rubbed her back. My heart constricted. I looked at Kieran. He was sitting up straight, his dark eyes fixed on me with an adult-like severity. "Mom, that guy said he was our dad. Is that true, Mom?" Kieran's question hung in the quiet kitchen, heavy as a cinder block. Even though I had anticipated this, hearing the word dad from my own son's lips felt like swallowing glass. What should I say? Say that the man is indeed their biological father, but he traded us for a promotion? Say he's a treacherous monster? If I planted seeds of hatred in their pure hearts, they would grow up scarred, harboring the deep insecurity of abandoned children. I refused to let my kids become instruments of vengeance, but I couldn't lie either. A lie would shatter the absolute trust they placed in me. I took a deep breath, smiled softly, and took Kieran's small hand. "Kieran, Harper, listen to Mom. Every family in the world is built differently. Some families have grandpas, grandmas, a dad, and a mom. Some families only have a dad. And our family is a superhero team. Just Mom and you two. Do you remember?" Both children nodded simultaneously. I had taught them this since they were old enough to comprehend the world, ensuring they never felt inadequate when they saw other kids being picked up by fathers. That man today? He is the person who helped make you, along with me. Harper's eyes widened in shock. Kieran blinked rapidly. "But making a baby doesn't make someone a family," I continued gently. "A long time ago, that man and I were walking on the same path. But then he decided he wanted to climb a mountain, and I wanted to go to the ocean. We wanted completely different things in life. So, we went our separate ways. He has his life, and Mom has her life, with you. Then why did he come see us? Did he want to take us away?" Kieran asked. His voice laced with intense suspicion. His little hand gripped mine tighter. I stroked his tense knuckles. "My little boy was trying to protect our nest. It broke my heart and made me fiercely proud. He came because he was probably curious to see how big Mom's superheroes have grown. He bought toys because he wanted to say hi. But listen to me very carefully. Whoever it is, friend or stranger, if they want to take you anywhere without Mom's permission, it is wrong. You have the right to say no. You don't have to take their toys, and you never have to go with them. You only need to remember one thing. No one in this world can ever tear us apart. The only way that happens is if Mom stops breathing. Until then, I will fight for you to the very end." "No. Mommy has to live for 1,000 years, Harper cried out, throwing her arms around my neck and wiping her tears on my sweater. Kieran slid off his stool and wrapped his arms tightly around my waist. His voice was so resolute. It brought tears to my eyes. I don't want his stupid toys. And I don't need a dad. I only need Mom. When I grow up, I'm going to buy Mom a giant house, and I'll beat up anyone who makes you cry. The tears I had held back for days finally spilled over. They weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of overwhelming, triumphant joy. I hugged their small, warm bodies fiercely. The scent of their strawberry shampoo washed away all the bitterness. Vance might have billion-dollar resorts, Maybachs, and boardrooms at his command, but he was a beggar in the kingdom of love. He would never, in his miserable life, experience this kind of absolute, unconditional devotion. That night, after reading a bedtime story and making sure they were fast asleep, I stepped out onto the balcony with a glass of water. The Chicago skyline glowed in the distance. I knew driving Vance away today had temporarily blocked him, But a cornered animal with powerful backers wouldn't stay quiet. Right on cue, my cell phone vibrated on the coffee table. The clock read exactly 11:00 p.m. The caller ID was a pristine, unlisted number, the kind exclusively owned by the ultra-wealthy. A cold premonition washed over me. I picked up the phone and pressed answer. The real shadow war was about to begin. The silence of the apartment was profound. I could hear the hum of the HVAC unit. I held the phone to my ear but didn't speak. On the other end, there was a calculated pause, lasting several seconds. I heard light, rhythmic breathing and faint jazz playing in the background. The caller clearly wanted to play a psychological power game, waiting for me to crack and speak first to seize the upper hand. But I was forged in patience. I waited. Finally, the other side yielded. A woman's voice came through the speaker. It was polished, dripping with East Coast boarding school elocution, but unable to hide its innate venomous arrogance. "This is Sloan, I assume?" "Yes." "And who is speaking?" A soft scoff echoed through the earpiece. "I'll keep this brief. I am Blair Harrington, Vance's legal wife, and the woman who holds his entire career in the palm of her hand. If you aren't completely stupid, you know exactly why I'm calling you at this hour." I leaned my back against the sliding glass balcony door. The corners of my mouth curled up in the darkness. Of course, a scandal of this magnitude couldn't stay hidden for long from a woman as possessively jealous as Blair. She probably had Vance tailed, or his erratic, panicked behavior over the last 3 days gave him away. The sudden existence of 2 children identical to her husband was a direct slap to the face of this billionaire princess. "Oh, good evening, Blair. Calling your husband's ex-wife this late at night? Things must be pretty rocky at home. Would you like me to recommend a good divorce attorney?" The breathing on the other end instantly became ragged. My utter lack of intimidation caught her completely off guard. People born into ridiculous wealth assume that simply dropping their last name will make peasants tremble. "Watch your mouth, you little tramp," Blair hissed, her elegant mask instantly cracking. "I didn't call to be lectured by a failure. I've already had you investigated. A single mother. A mid-level project manager at a boutique PR firm, barely making mortgage payments. Do you honestly believe that by using these 2 bastards, you can worm your way into my family and extort my husband? You are severely delusional, bastards." The word ignited a flare of rage in my chest. But I closed my eyes, compressing the fury until it turned into absolute razor-sharp ice. When fighting a woman blinded by jealousy, your best weapon is sub-zero apathy. "Blair, you did a great job investigating, but your PIs are painfully incompetent. If I wanted to extort you, I would have crashed your lavish wedding 5 years ago with a pregnant belly, not waited until now. The fact that your husband accidentally discovered my children is just divine karma for his sins. As for him losing sleep and stalking my kids' preschool, you need to lock your doors at home and put a tighter leash on your dog. Don't call me and bark into the phone. How dare you speak to me like that?" Blair shrieked. I heard the sharp sound of glass shattering on her end. "Listen to me. Harrington Group belongs to my family. Everything Vance has is because of me. I can make him a king, and I can crush him into the pavement. And I can do the exact same thing to you. If you don't back the hell off, I will make sure you never find a job in this city again. I will make sure you and your brats end up in a homeless shelter. And how do you plan to do that? Bribe my boss? Send corporate thugs to my condo?" I laughed, a light, carefree sound. "Blair, you are so used to living in a gold-plated bubble and crushing people with your checkbook that you assume everyone is as terrified of losing money as you are. But you forgot one simple truth. The woman walking barefoot is never afraid of the woman in designer heels. I started from zero. The worst that happens is I start from zero again. But you and your husband, a powerful high-society CEO power couple, caught harassing a single mother while trying to cover up his abandonment of a pregnant woman? How far will Harrington Group's stock plummet when I send the recording of this phone call to the Chicago Tribune and TMZ? Dead silence on the other end. I could only hear Blair's rapid, panicked breathing. She hadn't expected me to weaponize the media. I wasn't actually recording, but I knew exactly how to play her. For legacy families, bad PR is worse than death. Sensing her hesitation, I delivered the killing strike. Listen closely, because I will only say this once. First, my children are my flesh and blood, not leverage, and certainly not the bastards you dared to call them. Second, I don't dig through the trash to eat what I spit out 5 years ago. Your husband is your prized possession. But to me, he is garbage. If you want to keep your garbage safe, tie it down. Do not let him near my children again. If either of you shows up at my door, I guarantee Vance's CEO title and the pristine reputation of Harrington Group will burn to the ground. You, Blair stammered. Her initial high and mighty assault had been entirely derailed by my sheer aggression. Consider this friendly advice from someone who survived him. Have a wonderful night sleeping next to your model husband. Goodbye. I hit the end call button and immediately blocked the number. I tossed the phone onto the sofa, staring out into the dark city. Blair's call didn't scare me, but it confirmed one thing. Words and threats wouldn't be enough to eradicate this problem permanently. A petty, vindictive woman like Blair and a vain coward like Vance would never stop until they felt they had won, or until they were utterly, irreparably broken. I walked into my small home office and woke up my laptop. The harsh blue light illuminated my cold face. Blair was right about one thing. She had investigated me, but she only saw the decoy. She saw a mid-level project manager at a PR agency. What Blair, Vance, and the entire Chicago real estate world didn't know was that the shadow owner holding 40% of the equity in Apex Materials and Logistics, the sole supplier holding a critical, multi-million-dollar contract with Harrington Group, was a woman named Sloane Kensington. For the past 5 years, I hadn't just been changing diapers. I worked like a woman possessed. I used the meager savings from my freelance accounting gigs and the razor-sharp instincts that earned me my economics degree to day trade and invest in suburban commercial real estate. My calculated, aggressive risks paid off exponentially. I didn't buy designer bags or luxury SUVs to show off. Every cent I made was funneled through my college mentor and closest confidant, a brilliant corporate attorney named Callahan. Together, we founded Apex Materials. I stayed completely in the shadows as the majority shareholder, while Cal acted as the public CEO. To the outside world, I was a struggling PR manager in a Honda Civic. This flawless camouflage kept my children safe and off everyone's radar. But the wheel of fortune had turned. Harrington Group, under Vance's leadership as CEO, was currently throwing billions into a massive luxury resort development on the shores of Lake Michigan, and the exclusive supplier of the imported Italian marble and high-grade steel that the entire construction timeline depended on was none other than Apex Materials. To secure this contract, Vance had staked his personal reputation and his CEO title in front of his father-in-law's board of directors. If Apex halted the supply, the mega project would stall. The delay penalties would run into the tens of millions. Harrington Group would face an existential liquidity crisis, and Vance would be thrown to the wolves by his father-in-law. I opened the encrypted folder containing the Harrington Group contract. A dangerous smile touched my lips. Vance, Blair, you love using power to crush people? Let me show you what it feels like when power slowly strangles you to death. The clatter of my keyboard echoed in the quiet apartment. The chessboard was set. The countdown to the total annihilation of this arrogant billionaire family began the moment I hit send. Monday morning. The Chicago air was crisp, tasting of exhaust fumes and the frantic energy of the morning commute. After Blair's unhinged midnight call, I was absolutely certain she wouldn't just sit back. A spoiled heiress accustomed to obedience couldn't swallow the insult of a single mother hanging up on her. I was right. Just after I dropped the kids off at Miss Soff, Delaney's classroom, making sure to brief her on strict pickup protocols, I hopped on my Vespa. The moment I pulled up to the intersection outside the school, a white Range Rover with illegally dark-tinted windows swerved violently, cutting me off and blocking the crosswalk. Tires squealed. If I hadn't slammed my brakes and braced my feet, I would have gone over the handlebars. The passenger door flew open. Vance stepped out first, looking exhausted, his face tight with anxiety. Right behind him stepped a woman in her early 30s. She was rail-thin, draped head to toe in Celine and Chanel. Her face, beneath a thick layer of flawless makeup, exuded a harsh, angular cruelty hidden behind massive Tom Ford sunglasses. It was Blair Harrington. Standing on her corner, Mrs. Higgins, the crossing guard, clutched her stop sign. For someone who had worked this block for years, domestic drama wasn't new. But a confrontation smelling this strongly of old money and venom was a rare treat. I didn't panic. I didn't even try to back up. I calmly turned off the ignition, pulled out the key, crossed my arms, and waited to see what kind of amateur theater this power couple was about to perform. So this is the infamous Sloane. Blair's voice was sharp and intentionally loud, projecting so the lingering parents on the sidewalk could hear. She wanted to use public shame to paint me as a home-wrecking extortionist. She took off her sunglasses and looked me up and down like I was a piece of trash stuck to her shoe. You look even more pathetic in person than in the PI's photos. Any woman with an ounce of self-respect who got dumped 5 years ago would have crawled under a rock. But you? You dare drag your bastard kids out of the woodwork to extort my husband? Have you no shame? Vance, looking visibly pale, tugged gently at his wife's tweed sleeve. Blair, keep your voice down. There are people staring. This isn't the place. Let's just go into that coffee shop across the street and settle this. He looked at me, a pleading edge to his voice. Sloane, please. Just step inside for 5 minutes. We need to resolve this permanently. Resolve this permanently. I smirked, glanced at the empty artisan coffee shop on the corner, kicked down the kickstand of my Vespa, and walked past them. I wasn't afraid of a public spectacle. In the furthest booth of the empty cafe, Blair didn't even bother ordering a drink. She slammed her $15,000 crocodile leather Birkin bag onto the table, pulled out a thick manila folder, and shoved it across the wood toward me. I am a businesswoman. I don't do small talk, Blair snapped. This is a requisition order for a DNA test at the premier genetics clinic in the Loop. My family's clinic. I don't believe for 1 second those bastards belong to my husband. A manipulative gold digger like you probably saw Vance make CEO, found 2 random orphans, paid for plastic surgery to make them look like him, and now you're trying to shake us down. She leaned over the table, sneering. If you have the guts, bring them to the clinic tomorrow morning. Prove it. I looked at the folder on the table, then up at Vance. He immediately looked down at his lap, unable to meet my eyes. So that was how he explained it to his wife. He was too much of a coward to admit he ruthlessly dumped his pregnant wife. He was so utterly spineless that he spun a sci-fi lie about me orchestrating a plastic surgery conspiracy just to maintain his perfect image in his wife's eyes. I laughed. The crystal-clear, bone-chilling sound bounced off the exposed brick walls of the cafe. Vance, you never cease to amaze me. 5 years ago, I thought you were just a ruthless careerist. I didn't realize that in 5 years, you'd devolve into a castrated coward hiding behind your wife's skirt, too terrified to claim your own blood. Plastic surgery on 5-year-olds for extortion? Blair, you have a vivid imagination. You've been watching too much reality TV. Shut your mouth. Blair slammed her hand on the table. Are you going to take the test or not? Give me a yes or no. If you refuse, it means you're a fraud. And I will call the CPD right now and have you arrested for extortion and harassment. Her fake aristocratic composure was entirely gone, replaced by the shrieking of a spoiled child denied her way. I slowly picked up the requisition form and twirled it in my fingers. I knew perfectly well that whatever I said, a paranoid, hyper-controlling woman like Blair would never believe it until she saw a lab report with an embossed seal. And frankly, I wanted that piece of paper, not to extort them, but to use as the ultimate, lethal weapon to permanently sever Vance from my children's lives. I looked up, tossing the paper back onto the table, locking eyes with Blair. Fine. I agree to the DNA test. You? You're really agreeing? Vance's head snapped up. A strange spark flashed in his eyes, a bizarre cocktail of dread and latent, twisted pride. Blair crossed her arms smugly. She thought she had backed me into a corner. She was 100% convinced the test would expose my fraud. Yes, I agree, but I have one condition. A condition? Blair scoffed. How much of a buyout do you want for your little scam? $1 million? 2? My family loses that much in the couch cushions, but giving even a dime to trash like you makes my skin crawl. I raised a single index finger and waved it slowly in front of Blair's face. My voice dropped to a lethal whisper. I don't want a single filthy red cent of your money. My condition is simple. After the DNA test proves with 99.99% certainty that these 2 children are biologically Vance's, the 2 of you will sign a legally binding, notarized relinquishment agreement drafted by my attorney. It will explicitly outline a legally binding non-interference and non-disclosure agreement, NDA. It stipulates that Vance will never publicly claim paternity, never pursue visitation, and is legally barred from coming within 1,000 feet of us. Furthermore, if he breaches this contract or attempts to drag my children into family court, a penalty clause activates, stripping him of 100% of his vested equity in the Harrington Group. I smiled. Are you willing to take that bet, Miss Businesswoman? The air in the cafe froze. Blair stared at me, completely derailed. She had expected me to use the kids to demand child support, trust funds, or a chunk of their estate. Instead, I was using the test to legally amputate Vance from the kids' lives, while threatening her family's corporate equity. Sloan, don't take this too far. This is still my blood. How can I sign a paper abandoning my own children? Vance exploded, slamming his fist on the table. But Blair instantly shot him a look that could melt steel. She hated risk. The mere possibility that Vance had bastard children out there was an unbearable humiliation. If they were truly his, she wanted them legally eradicated so no one could ever lay claim to the empire she controlled. I agree, Blair snapped. If the test proves they are his, I will personally hand you the pen to sign that waiver. I'll be thrilled if you know your place and keep those bastards out of my family's sight forever. And if the results show you're a fraud, prepare to rot in a federal cell. Tomorrow morning, 9:00 a.m. at the clinic. My husband will be waiting. With that, Blair grabbed her Birkin, stood up, and jerked her head, signaling Vance to heel. Vance looked at me for a split second, his eyes a war zone of conflicting emotions. But ultimately, he obediently trailed after his billionaire wife. Watching the white Range Rover speed away, I slowly lifted my iced Americano and took a sip. Bitter. But the aftertaste was incredibly sweet. The trap was sprung. Blair thought she had everything under control. She had no idea that tomorrow's DNA test was the detonator that would blow her beloved empire to ash. Because in the shadows of the Chicago corporate world, I wasn't a struggling single mother. I was the executioner holding the axe over their necks. 5 years ago, on the night I walked out of that flooding basement apartment with nothing but a suitcase, I had exactly $200 in my checking account. Poverty, humiliation, and betrayal taught me a bloody lesson. In this world, men will betray you. Love will betray you. But the money you earn with your own 2 hands will never abandon you. During my twin pregnancy, I lived like a feral animal fighting for survival. I took on freelance accounting for 6 small LLCs. I worked day and night, bags under my eyes, my belly swollen, but my fingers never stopped flying across the keyboard. Thanks to my relentless drive, my economic savvy, and my summa cum laude degree, I slowly won the trust of highly demanding corporate clients. After Kieran and Harper were born, I didn't stop. With one hand rocking a bassinet and the other mixing formula, I analyzed market trends, tracked supply chain deficits, and began investing in undervalued industrial real estate in the suburbs. Fate rewarded me. My aggressive, hyper-calculated investments yielded exponential returns. I didn't buy designer clothes or flashy cars. I took my capital and, alongside Callahan, my trusted friend and corporate lawyer, founded Apex Materials and Logistics. We specialized in importing high-end construction materials. I stayed in the shadows as the chairman with a 40% controlling stake, leaving Cal to act as the public face and CEO. To my neighbors, I was just a mid-level manager at a PR firm, paying off a modest mortgage. This perfect camouflage kept the predators away, but the universe loves irony. Harrington Group, under Vance's leadership, was betting its entire future on a mega resort project, and the exclusive supplier holding the contract for the crucial materials the entire timeline depended on, was Apex. To push the contract through, Vance had personally vouched for it to his board. If Apex pulled the plug, the project would face catastrophic delays. The penalty clauses would bleed Harrington Group dry, and Vance would be immediately ousted by his ruthless father-in-law. The night before the DNA test, I sat in my locked home office. The desk lamp cast a warm yellow glow over my files. I picked up my phone and dialed Cal's number. Cal, how is the supply schedule looking for Harrington Group? Callahan's crisp, professional voice came through. Good evening, Madam Chairman. The first massive shipment of Italian marble for Phase 1 is sitting in the port. Harrington is breathing down our necks to authorize the release. Tomorrow, they're sending a rep to sign off and wire the remaining 50% for this phase. Why the sudden interest? You usually let me handle the day-to-day. I spun a pen between my fingers, staring out at the city lights. Cal, don't authorize the release. Freeze the shipment at the port indefinitely. Freeze it? Sloan, are you joking? The contract is inked. If we hold the shipment without cause, Harrington will sue us into the Stone Age for breach of contract. The liquidated damages would be massive. What are you playing at? Cal was stunned. He knew I was methodical and never played games with our bottom line. I took a deep breath, my voice dropping to a glacial absolute register. I'm not joking. Activate the contingency clause on page 15. The force majeure and market fluctuation provision. We have the legal right to delay shipment for up to 15 days to reassess costs without penalty due to global supply chain instability. During those 15 days, I want you to leak a rumor to the industry press that Apex is considering selling this exact shipment of marble to South Shore Development, Harrington's biggest rival, at a 20% markup. Sloan, wait, you want to back Harrington into a corner? Their mega project is at a critical juncture. A single day of delay costs them millions. They will go absolutely ballistic, especially their CEO, Vance Sterling. Word is, his father-in-law already treats him like a rented mule. If this shipment gets delayed, his career is dead in the water. My lips curved into a cruel, satisfied smile. That is exactly what I want, Cal. I want to back Vance Sterling into an inescapable corner. I want him to watch everything he sold his soul for burn to the ground in front of his eyes. Do exactly as I say. Any financial penalties incurred, I will cover out of my personal dividends. Prepare the paperwork, wait for my signal tomorrow, and FedEx the official notice of delay to Harrington Group. Understood, Cal sighed. I don't know what history you have with this Sterling guy, but if he crossed a single mother as ruthless as you, he signed his own death warrant. I'll get it ready. I hung up and placed the phone on the desk. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I was never a vindictive person. If Vance had just sat in his CEO chair and left my children alone, I probably would have let the past remain the past. But he was greedy. He wanted to hoard his billionaire wife's wealth and steal my children to stroke his ego. And worse, Blair had dared to threaten my livelihood and insult my kids. I reached out and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside sat a small wooden lockbox. I took out a yellowed piece of paper. It was the marital settlement agreement from 5 years ago. My fierce signature was still indented into the paper, alongside the faint, dried watermarks from the rain that night. Vance, you priced my youth and my dignity at $50,000. Tomorrow, with a DNA test and an Apex Materials contract, I will show you the true cost of betraying your own blood. It's a price 10,000 times higher than your pathetic check. I folded the paper and slipped it into my purse, ready for the showdown at the clinic. The real bloodletting was about to begin. The VIP consultation room at the genetics clinic in the Loop was bathed in sterile, blinding white light. The atmosphere was pulled as taut as a piano wire, ready to snap at the slightest touch. I sat comfortably on a black leather sofa, casually scrolling through emails on my phone. Opposite me, Blair was aggressively tapping her Louboutin heel against the tile, the sound echoing like a metronome of anxiety. Her lips were pressed into a thin, white line, her manicured fingers twisting a silk Hermes scarf into a knot. Vance stood leaning against the wall, refusing to look at me. His eyes were glued to the laboratory door. Sweat beaded on his forehead, even though the AC was blasting at 68 degrees. 3 days ago, I had brought Kieran and Harper here to provide cheek swabs. Vance had given blood under Blair's hawkish supervision. She was so paranoid I would bribe someone to swap the samples that she paid a massive premium for an expedited, heavily monitored, confidential process. And now, the moment of truth. The door clicked open, and the chief of genetics walked in, holding a sealed, pristine white envelope. Blair lunged at him like a hawk diving for prey. Stripping away any pretense of high society manners, she practically snatched the envelope out of the doctor's hands. Vance took a heavy step forward, his breathing ragged. "Give it to me," Blair hissed. Her trembling fingers ripped the seal. She pulled out the lab report, complete with the clinic's red embossed seal. Her manic, furious eyes scanned down to the conclusion box. I remained seated, taking a slow sip of the green tea a nurse had brought me earlier. I didn't need to look at the paper. Watching Blair's face was enough. The play was over. In a fraction of a second, Blair's heavily contoured face drained of all color, resembling a corpse. Her eyes bulged as they locked onto the bolded number. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Blair. What is it? Vance stepped closer, his voice shaking. He reached for the paper. Is it true? Smack. A deafening, vicious slap echoed off the sterile walls. Blair swung her arm with all her might, striking Vance across the face so hard his designer glasses flew off and clattered against the floor. 5 bright red finger marks immediately swelled on the cheek of the respected CEO. You lying piece of shit! You lied to me! Blair shrieked, her voice bouncing off the walls. You told my father you had a brief, meaningless marriage. No kids, no baggage. Then what the hell is a 99.99% probability of paternity? You left 2 bastards out there so this trashy woman could come extort my family and humiliate me. You fucking coward! Blair screamed like a banshee, throwing the DNA report directly into Vance's face. The heavy papers fluttered to the floor. Vance, clutching his stinging cheek, stood frozen, utterly annihilated by the humiliation of being beaten by his wife in front of his ex. He didn't dare raise his voice to defend himself. In his eyes, I saw a pathetic cocktail of emotion, absolute terror of the woman who held the purse strings, and a twisted, sick flash of pride that he was, in fact, the father of 2 perfect children. I slowly stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked over to pick up the original lab report from the floor. The 99.99% was printed in thick black ink. I folded it and placed it in my purse. Blair, you're yelling at the wrong person, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria like ice. He didn't lie to you about having kids. He was just so entirely devoid of a spine that he abandoned his pregnant wife to make it to his wedding fitting with you. You thought you married a golden boy, but you actually dragged a parasitic gold digger into your mansion. Now the truth is out. This test isn't for extortion. It's to execute our agreement. I pulled the thick, notarized relinquishment contract from my bag and slammed it onto the glass coffee table between them. Read it. The terms are ironclad. Vance voluntarily terminates all parental rights, forever forfeiting any claim to custody or visitation. If he breaches it, you owe me his equity. Blair, you don't want your family's fortune diluted, do you? You don't want to see these children ever again, right? Then make your husband sign. Blair was hyperventilating, her chest heaving. She glared at the document, then whipped around to Vance, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at his chest. Sign it. Sign it right now. Waive your rights to those bastards. If you don't sign that paper this second, I swear to God, I will call my father from this room and have you fired. I will throw you out of my house with nothing but the suit on your back. You'll be sleeping on Lower Wacker Drive. Blair's psychotic ultimatum backed Vance against a cliff. He looked up at me, his eyes brimming with impotence and desperation. Sloane, please, don't force me to do this. This is my blood. I'll pay you whatever you want. Just don't make me sign away my own kids. I took a step closer, driving my glacial stare into the face of the man playing the tragic father. Blood? When you threw me out into a thunderstorm, did you care about blood? When you told your wife I found orphans and gave them plastic surgery to extort you, did you care about blood? Stop acting, Vance. You don't feel sorry for the kids. You feel sorry for your own bruised ego. Pick up the pen and sign. My patience is gone. Blair grabbed the heavy metal pen from the table, shoved it violently into Vance's hand, and snarled, "Sign!" Under the crushing, terrifying pressure of his billionaire wife, the trembling hand that had once tossed a divorce petition at me now gripped the pen. Biting his lip until it nearly bled, Vance scrawled his jagged, defeated signature on the dotted line. The second the ink was dry, I snatched the paper, folded it neatly, and placed it securely in my bag. Now we're done. Take your piece of paper and get out, Blair snapped, aggressively adjusting her jacket to regain her posture as the conquering aristocrat who had just paid off the help. She pulled a checkbook from her Birkin, scribbled a number, ripped it out, and tossed it at my feet. The check for $100,000 fluttered onto the tile. That's for your silence. Take it and fix your pathetic life. A poor bitch like you has probably never seen 6 figures. I looked down at the check on the floor and laughed. The sound was bright, cheerful, and entirely mocking. I didn't bend down. Instead, I raised the stiletto heel of my shoe and ground it directly into the center of the check, twisting my foot until the paper tore into jagged shreds against the tile. I told you, Blair, your money is too filthy for me to touch. Keep it. Use it to buy some anxiety medication. Because in the next few days, your family is going to need a massive prescription. With that, I turned on my heel and strode out of the clinic, leaving Blair paralyzed by my sheer audacity, and Vance covering his face with his hands in utter disgrace. The moment I stepped out of the clinic doors into the bustling Chicago street, my phone buzzed. A text from Cal. Official notice of supply suspension sent to Harrington Group. They are in absolute panic mode. The chairman is tearing the office apart, looking for whoever is behind Apex. I tilted my head up to the bright blue sky and brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear. The warm-up was over. The legal shield protecting my children was secured in my bag. Now it was time to play my royal flush. The sweetest revenge was about to commence. Walking away from the clinic with that notarized relinquishment in my bag felt like a boulder that had been crushing my chest for 5 years was finally pulverized. From this day forward, Kieran and Harper belonged solely to me. No one had the legal or moral right to use toxic blood ties to rip them away or threaten our peace. However, I knew Vance's character perfectly, and I knew Blair's petty, aristocratic vindictiveness. People who are used to stepping on others never accept it when their victim walks away with their head held high. They would try to strike back, and I had already forged a titanium shield of financial power to break their teeth on. Exactly as I expected, just 2 days after the clinic showdown, a hurricane hit the boutique PR firm I used as my cover. On Wednesday morning, the moment I booted up my office computer to approve a campaign budget, Jillian, the HR director and a close friend who had supported me during my toughest years, practically sprinted into my office. She was pale and out of breath. "Sloan, did you piss off someone massive at the top of the food chain? The VP of Harrington Group just called our CEO directly. They said they are pulling their $2 million sponsorship for the gala series we're producing. Furthermore, they heavily implied to the rest of the industry that anyone working with our agency will be blacklisted by Harrington. Unless..." Jillian hesitated, looking at me with deep sympathy. "Unless the agency fires me immediately." "Right, Jillian?" I finished her sentence, casually tapping my pen against my desk. Jillian nodded, letting out a heavy sigh. "The CEO is losing his mind. He told me to bring you to HR right now, to process your termination. Sloan, I know how valuable you are. You brought in half our major accounts alone. But Harrington's influence in Chicago is too massive. Our boss doesn't have the spine to fight them. What on earth happened? Should I try to negotiate? No need." I smiled warmly to reassure her and stood up, calmly gathering a few personal files. "It's personal. They want to use their power to take the food out of my children's mouths, to force me onto my knees to beg for mercy. But they miscalculated wildly. Process the paperwork, Jillian. I don't want the agency to suffer. Besides, I was planning on resigning soon anyway to focus on my own corporate ventures." Walking out of the building with a small cardboard box of personal items, I felt no sadness or disappointment. In fact, it was hilarious. Blair was truly a shallow, short-sighted woman. She thought that by cutting off my mid-level salary, she was backing me into a corner, forcing me to crawl back and beg for forgiveness. She had no idea this job was just a hobby to keep me from getting bored while maintaining my cover. As soon as I hailed a cab, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered, knowing exactly who it was. "Well, Sloan? Did you get your termination papers?" Blair's shrill, triumphant voice blasted through the speaker. "I told you. Going against my family in Chicago is digging your own grave. Unemployed single mother. Let's see how long it takes for the mortgage and preschool tuition to crush you. Want me to throw a few pennies your way so your brats don't starve?" I leaned back into the leather seat of the cab. My voice was perfectly flat, cold as the Chicago wind. "Blair, you certainly have a lot of free time on your hands. Your husband is currently being torn to shreds by your board of directors because of the supply chain collapse on the lakefront mega project, and you're busy worrying about my employment status? You should be worrying about Vance's CEO chair, not me." Blair faltered for a second. The force majeure letter from Apex had clearly hit Harrington Group like a meteor, but her arrogance wouldn't let her concede. My corporation's internal affairs have nothing to do with an insect like you. My father will solve the supply issue with a snap of his fingers. But you? I want you to experience true humiliation. I want you on your knees. If you have half a brain, sign over custody of those bastards to Vance and get the hell out of Illinois. My family will keep them like two pedigree dogs. It's better than them starving in the gutter with a useless mother. So that was their endgame. Force Vance to sign the relinquishment as a smokescreen to protect the inheritance, and then use their wealth and power behind my back to starve me out until I surrendered the kids to them. A vicious, cowardly strategy. They thought that stripped of my income, I would break. I gripped the phone tightly. My eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. Blair, you are severely overestimating yourself. Your father could break all 10 of his fingers snapping them, and he won't solve the crisis at Harrington Group this time. Hold on tight to your husband's chair, Blair, because tomorrow morning, you are going to be on your knees begging this insect for your life. I hung up before she could utter another syllable. The cab pulled up to the curb outside one of the most prestigious glass facade skyscrapers in the Loop. This was the headquarters of Apex Materials and Logistics. I stepped out of the cab, pushed my dark sunglasses up into my hair, and tossed the cardboard box of my PR agency belongings directly into a street-side dumpster. The mask of the struggling office worker was gone. From this minute on, I was Sloan Kensington, chairman of the board of Apex Materials, the woman holding Harrington Group by the throat. The 40th floor penthouse lobby of Apex Materials gleamed with custom marble and brushed steel. Employees in immaculate business attire moved with hushed efficiency. Cal, my CEO, was already waiting by the double doors of my corner office. Seeing me in a razor-sharp, tailored white Alexander McQueen pantsuit, walking with the lethal confidence of an apex predator, he smiled and stepped aside. Madam Chairman, the representatives from Harrington Group have been sweating in the boardroom for 2 hours. They are completely losing it. Freezing that marble shipment has paralyzed their entire billion-dollar site. Their CEO, Vance Sterling, has been blowing up my phone since 6:00 a.m., demanding a face-to-face with executive leadership. I walked into the massive office, settling into the high-backed black leather chair behind my desk, and slowly turned to look out at the panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. Let them sweat for another hour, Cal. Let their arrogance be completely pulverized. Then, bring Vance Sterling in here. Alone. Exactly 1 hour later, the heavy doors to my office clicked open. Vance walked in. He looked more pathetic than I had ever seen him. His bespoke suit was wrinkled. His tie hung loose. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes, and his face was utterly bloodless. The crushing pressure from his furious father-in-law and the looming threat of corporate bankruptcy had sucked every ounce of his manufactured confidence out of him. He walked in with his head bowed, his voice adopting a sickeningly sycophantic tone, completely unlike the arrogant sneer he used at the restaurant. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman. I am Vance Sterling, CEO of Harrington Group. I am here to formally request that you reconsider the suspension of our supply chain. We are prepared to increase our purchasing price by 10% to offset any market fluctuations. I am begging you. Vance spoke as he slowly raised his head. The moment his eyes met the woman sitting casually behind the massive obsidian desk, the words died in his throat. Vance's pupils shrank to microscopic dots. He staggered backward, his calves hitting a visitor's chair, nearly sending him tumbling to the floor. His jaw unhinged, his trembling hand pointing at me. Sloan? Why? Why are you here? Do you clean this office? No. That's impossible. He was still clinging to his pathetic delusions. A man who had spent 5 years viewing his ex-wife as a destitute loser simply couldn't process that the woman occupying the throne of Apex Materials was me. I smiled. A radiant, absolutely freezing smile. I placed my hands flat on the desk and slowly stood up. Mr. Sterling, please, look closely at the nameplate on the desk. Vance forced his eyes downward. Etched into the heavy brass plate were the words, Sloan Kensington, chairman of the board. Vance's knees gave out. He collapsed heavily into the chair. Shock, horror, and profound, emasculating humiliation ravaged his face. In this single second, the entire fake, billionaire persona gifted to him by his wife's family was violently ripped away, exposing him in front of the woman he had abandoned for being too poor. Surprised, Vance? The woman you mocked for not finding a meal ticket. The woman your wife got fired this morning. Turns out, she's the one holding your entire career by a thread. Harrington Group's life-or-death contract is entirely at the mercy of the mother of the 2 children you just legally abandoned, Sloan. You did this? You built this company just to ruin me? Are you insane? Where did you get this kind of capital? Vance stammered, sweat pouring down his face in sheets. To ruin you? I laughed, the sarcastic echo filling the cavernous office. You think too highly of yourself. I worked, I bled, and I built this empire to feed the 2 children you threw away, and to protect them from sociopaths like you and your wife. The fact that Harrington Group blundered into becoming dependent on Apex is just the natural result of your own incompetence and greed. Vance suddenly lunged forward, gripping the edge of my desk with white-knuckled desperation. His eyes were bloodshot. His tone shifted from shock to pathetic, whimpering begging. Sloan, please. For the sake of our 7 years together. For the sake of Kieran and Harper. I'm their father. Please, save me just this once. If Harrington loses this project, my father-in-law will literally kill me. Blair will throw me onto the street with nothing. I'll lose everything. Sloan, please authorize the shipment. I swear I'll compensate you and the kids. I'll do anything. Looking at the man practically on his knees, clinging to my desk, a wave of profound nausea washed over me. His depravity knew no bounds. When he had money, he trampled me and tried to steal my children. When he was backed against a wall, he crawled like a dog, invoking our dead marriage and his blood to exploit my pity. I swatted my hand out, forcefully knocking his sweaty palms off my desk. Our marriage died the night you threw 50 grand in my face and told me to get out of your sight. Father of Kieran and Harper? The contract with your signature on it is sitting in my safe. When your wife called me, insulted my children, and had me fired this morning, where were you? You sat there like a mute coward, terrified of losing your corner office and your wife's money, so you obediently signed away your kids. On what planet do you have the right to ask me for a favor? I pressed the intercom button on my phone. Cal, bring in the Harrington contract. Cal walked in, placing the thick binder on my desk. I picked up a heavy Mont Blanc pen, and with calculated coldness, drew a massive X across the signature page. I am officially announcing that Apex Materials is unilaterally terminating the supply contract with Harrington Group. We are prepared to pay the standard breach of contract penalties. The marble shipment currently sitting at the port will be immediately transferred to South Shore Development, your biggest competitor. Hearing his death sentence read aloud, Vance let out a guttural, animalistic scream and lunged across the desk at me. But Cal was faster. He intercepted Vance, shoving him back, and immediately buzzed security. 2 massive guards dragged the humiliated, thrashing CEO out of my office. Vance's screams echoed down the hallway, fading as the elevator doors sealed him away. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the traffic crawling like ants along the Chicago streets. The execution was complete. At exactly noon, Apex Materials issued a press release announcing the termination of the Harrington contract. The Chicago business world went into meltdown. By 3:00 p.m., my phone buzzed with 3 frantic voicemails from my former PR agency's CEO, profusely apologizing and begging me to return. I deleted them without listening. This wasn't just a financial hit. It was a fatal blow to Harrington Group's market reputation. The lakefront megaproject was indefinitely paralyzed. Harrington's stock price cratered, wiping out hundreds of millions of dollars in market cap in a single afternoon. And naturally, the scapegoat for this apocalyptic catastrophe was the man who signed the Apex partnership. According to rumors swirling through the financial district, the emergency board meeting at Harrington Group that afternoon turned into a bloodbath. Blair's father, the chairman, was so enraged he smashed a priceless antique vase against the boardroom wall. He immediately stripped Vance of his CEO title and ordered forensic accounting to investigate Vance for embezzlement, preparing to throw him under the bus to appease the furious shareholders. But the ultimate tragedy for Vance didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in his wife's Winnetka mansion. That evening, as I sat on the soft rug in my living room, helping Kieran and Harper build a Lego castle, my phone rang. It was Blair's number. But the voice that came through was no longer the shrill, arrogant aristocrat offering me pennies. I answered, putting it on speaker. Sloan? You. You lied to me. You're the chairman of Apex. Why didn't you say something? Blair's voice was choked, broken by hysterical sobs, vibrating with a toxic mix of rage and terror. The realization that the woman she had viciously humiliated that morning was the executioner holding her family's empire had completely broken her. Blair, I never lied to you. I've always stood on my own 2 feet. It's you, blinded by your own inherited wealth and arrogance, who couldn't be bothered to understand who you were picking a fight with. Just this morning, you wanted me on my knees handing over my kids. And now your family is bleeding out because of your ego and your husband's sheer stupidity. I am begging you, Sloane. I was blind. How much do you want for damages? I'll pay anything. Please, let Harrington off the hook just this once. My father is in the hospital with a suspected heart attack, and Vance, that worthless piece of shit, I threw him out. I made him leave with nothing but the clothes on his back. He signed the divorce papers. Please, reverse the cancellation. I am on my knees begging you. Blair sobbed into the receiver. Her hypocrisy made me laugh out loud. Just yesterday, she was defending her husband's honor. Today, the second her and their nay. Karma in this world was fast, precise, and absolute. He betrayed for money, and in the end, he was betrayed and discarded for money. Blair, business is war. There is no room for tears. Apex has already signed the transfer contract with South Shore. The ink is dry. Go take care of your family's mess. As for Vance, you throwing him out is your business, not mine. Never call this number again. I hung up, decisively severing the connection. The threat from Blair was neutralized. She would spend the next year drowning in corporate litigation and a messy divorce. She had neither the time nor the capital to bother us again. But Vance. I knew a man who had lost his career, his wealth, and his marriage in a 2-4-hour span would become desperate. He was a cornered rat, and his final, delusional target would be me and the kids. Kieran finished snapping the final tower onto his Lego castle and looked up at me with his calm, dark eyes. Mommy, that bad man got punished, right? I smiled and kissed the top of his head, a profound sense of peace settling into my bones. Yes, baby. People who do bad things and try to hurt us always get punished. From today on, no one is ever going to bother us again. But I was slightly off. A man backed into a corner can reach unfathomable depths of shamelessness. At 1:00 a.m., a brutal thunderstorm rolled off Lake Michigan and slammed into Chicago. Lightning violently illuminated the night sky. The wind battered the glass doors of the balcony. Suddenly, my doorbell rang. A frantic, continuous buzzing that sounded psychotic in the middle of the night. I glanced at the security intercom screen. Through the grainy, rain-distorted feed, I saw Vance. He was soaked to the bone, his clothes clinging to him in a pathetic mess, his hair plastered to his forehead. He was pounding on the heavy steel door, screaming something incomprehensible over the thunder. The beggar from my past had finally crawled to my doorstep. His banging echoed through the quiet hallway like a scene from a cheap horror movie. On the screen, Vance looked like a deranged, wounded animal. His wife's family had stripped him of everything. His black cards were frozen, his Maybach repossessed, his accounts locked. From a master of the universe, he had plummeted to a homeless beggar in less than a day, and in his utter desperation, the only life raft he tried to grab onto was, ironically, the wife and children he had discarded. I didn't open the door. I walked into the bedroom, pulling the comforters up over Kieran and Harper. They were sleeping deeply, the rhythmic sound of the rain drowning out the madness outside. I walked back into the living room, poured a glass of warm water, and sat calmly on the sofa. The pounding continued, accompanied by the muffled sobbing of a grown man. Sloane! Open the door. I know I was wrong. I'm a monster. I'm worse than an animal! Please, Sloane, just open the door! It's so cold out here. I have nowhere else to go. Let me see the kids. Daddy came back for you and Mom. His pathetic wailing seeped through the cracks in the doorframe. If it were a softer woman sitting here, she might have felt a pang of pity for the shivering, weeping man. But my pity died the night I walked into a storm with 2 babies in my belly. I stood up, walked to the door, but kept the deadbolt firmly locked. I stood separated from him by 2 inches of solid steel. My voice cut through the noise, sharp and cold. "Stop screaming, Vance. You're waking the neighbors. And do not ever refer to yourself as Daddy here. My children do not have a traitor for a father." Hearing my voice, Vance seemed to catch a second wind of hope. He slammed his body against the door, pressing his face near the jamb. His voice shook violently. "Sloan, you answered. Forgive me. I am so sorry. The last 5 years were hell. I was tortured every day by the guilt of leaving you. In Blair's house, I was treated like a dog. They mocked me and stepped on me. I was blinded by greed. But now I have nothing. I realize now that you are the only person in this world who truly loved me. You and the kids are my real family. Sloan, you're the chairman of Apex. You're rich. Save me. Let's start over. I swear I'll stay home. I'll cook. I'll clean. I'll be the best father to Kieran and Harper. Just open the door." The best father? I let out a bitter, incredulous laugh, astounded by the limitless depths of his audacity. "Vance, what exactly is your definition of a good father? A man who only remembers his kids when he's thrown out on the street without a dime? When you were a CEO, you tried to buy my kids and steal them from me. When your wife called to humiliate us and get me fired, where were you? You sat there like a mute coward, terrified of losing your rich wife's allowance, so you signed your kids away in a clinic. And now that you're a beggar, you want to play the repentant family man? Don't you think this script is a little too cheap and nauseating?" "No, Sloan, it wasn't like that. They forced me. Blair forced me to sign. I didn't want to," Vance babbled frantically, slamming his fists against the door. "Enough," I shouted, silencing his pathetic performance. "Forced or voluntary, you know the truth. You don't love me. And you don't love those children. You only love yourself. You didn't come here tonight out of remorse. You came here because you found out I own Apex. I have money. You want to latch onto me like a leech so you can keep living comfortably. You think I'm a charity shelter? Sorry. This shelter permanently closed 5 years ago. Get off my property before I call the cops and have you dragged out in handcuffs." Vance went dead silent. The naked truth I laid out stripped him of his last shred of plausible deniability. But seconds later, the true nature of a cornered rat revealed itself. "Sloan, don't push me." Vance's voice mutated from a whimpering plea to a venomous, hissing threat. "You pushed me to this. You think you can just live in peace? I am telling you, legally, I am still their biological father. Even if I sign that paper, blood is blood. You have no right to keep them from me. Tomorrow, I'm going to child services. I'm going to post all over social media that you're a cruel, vindictive bitch keeping a father from his kids. Let's see how you sit in your chairman's seat when the whole city is calling you a monster." His hypocrisy didn't surprise me. A rabid dog will always bite. I smiled, unlocked my phone, and tapped the screen. "Perfect. I just saved the audio recording from the security camera of you crying, admitting you were treated like a dog by your wife, that you got thrown out, and begging me to be your sugar mama. Go ahead. Post on Facebook. I'll upload this audio file right next to your notarized relinquishment of rights and the ultrasound photo you ignored 5 years ago. Let's see who the public decides to crucify. A self-made single mother, or a gold-digging coward who hides behind women and sells his own blood for a Porsche. You want to play hardball? Let's play. We'll see who gets buried in this city." Total silence on the other side of the door. The rain grew louder. I could hear Vance's ragged, terrified breathing, followed by a pathetic groan of absolute defeat, and then the sound of wet, staggering footsteps retreating down the hallway. He was terrified. He finally realized he had 0 ammunition left against the woman he had shoved off a cliff 5 years ago. The next morning, when I opened my door to take the kids to school, there was nothing but a small puddle of rainwater on the welcome mat. Vance was gone, leaving behind the final period on his miserable illusions. 3 months after the earthquake Apex Materials caused for Harrington Group, our lives had returned to absolute normalcy. I didn't move into a mega mansion, and I didn't buy a fleet of supercars. I remained the same single mother who drove her kids to school on a Vespa and built Legos on the rug at night. I handed the majority of the chairman duties over to Cal, stepping back into a strategic advisory role so I could dedicate my time to Kieran and Harper. I wanted them to grow up as normal, grounded kids, their souls untwisted by the gravity of extreme wealth. As for Vance, Cal informed me that he had been driven out of Chicago. With a destroyed reputation, blacklisted by his ex-wife's family, and facing looming legal battles, no firm in the Midwest would touch him. He eventually slinked back to our small hometown, managing a tiny, rundown hardware store, living a miserable, invisible existence. The scales of fate had balanced perfectly. However, there was one knot left in my soul that I knew I had to untie. Not for me, but for the kids. No matter how fiercely I protected them, the truth about their biological father was a blank space in their minds. I refused to let them grow up in the dark, or worse, have their minds poisoned by rumors later in life. On a brilliant, sunny Sunday, I took Kieran and Harper to Millennium Park. The kids were swinging, their bright laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. I sat on a bench with a thermos of coffee, waving at them. "Kieran, Harper, come here, take a break, have some juice." They ran over, flushed and happy. Harper climbed onto my lap while Kieran grabbed his juice box. I wiped the sweat from their foreheads, looking tenderly at the two faces that so closely resembled that man, yet possessed eyes as clear and unyielding as my own. "My treasures, do you remember that man with the big toys outside your school a few months ago?" Kieran stopped drinking. Harper looked up at me, surprised, and nodded. "Yeah, I remember." "He said he was our dad," Harper answered quickly. "But you said he wasn't in our family. Why are we talking about him, Mommy?" Kieran frowned, on high alert. He remembered my words perfectly. I gently rubbed Kieran's back and smiled. "Today, I want to tell you a story. A very true story about our family." The kids instantly went quiet, ready to listen. "A long time ago, when you were just two tiny peas in Mommy's tummy, that man and I were a family. He is the person who helped create you." Harper's eyes widened. Kieran's brow furrowed as he processed the data. But being a dad isn't just about making babies. Being a dad means loving your family, protecting them, and staying by their side when things get really hard. That man couldn't do that. He chose a different life, one with a lot of money and fancy toys, but a life that didn't have room for you or me. He left when I needed him the most. I couldn't suppress a small sigh, but my voice remained incredibly steady. I didn't use the words betrayed, abandoned, or bastard. In front of my children, I simply presented the truth as honestly and gently as a 5-year-old could comprehend. "So, I decided to raise you all by myself. For the last 5 years, I've been your mom and your dad. When that man showed up at your school, I was very angry, because he wanted to take you away without asking me, and without asking you." "Mommy, where is he now?" Harper asked timidly. "He moved far away. To a place where he belongs." Kieran looked up at me, his dark, perceptive eyes piercing right to my core. His question caught me off guard. "Mom, if he's our dad, does that mean we have to call him Dad? Do we have to go live with him?" I took his small hands in mine. "That is entirely your choice. I'm not telling you this to forbid you from knowing him or to make you hate him. I just want you to know the truth. Blood is something nature gives you. You can't change it. But a family is built on love and showing up every single day. If, when you're older, you want to see him or call him Dad, I will never stop you. But right now, I want to ask you, how do you feel?" The children sat in silence for a long time. The autumn wind rustled the yellowing leaves. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the park. Kieran spoke first. He slid off the bench, stood up straight, and crossed his arms over his chest with an incredibly serious expression. "I don't like him. He made you cry once, and he made you mad. Miss Delaney says, boys who are mean to girls are bad guys. I don't need a dad. I have enough with you. You're my superhero, Mom. You're the queen." Harper nodded vigorously and threw her arms around my neck. "Yeah, Mommy makes the best food. Mommy tells the best stories. We're not going anywhere. We're staying with you." Their innocent but ironclad words were a balm that healed the very last, deepest scars in my soul. The truth of their origin didn't break them, and it didn't plant seeds of toxic hatred. With their pure hearts, they had made their choice. Blood meant nothing compared to devotion. The person who loved them unconditionally was their family. I hugged them both, laughing brightly in the middle of the park. My decision to open up and tell the truth was the right one. It was as if I had pulled a splinter from my heart, allowing it to finally heal. From this moment on, the ghost of Vance Sterling permanently lost all power to threaten or disturb our peace. In the 6th autumn of my life as a single mother, a rare, cool breeze swept through Chicago. That morning, I stood on my balcony, sipping hot black coffee, watching the city wake up. Everything had faded into the past. The high society gossip about the ex-wife who ruthlessly destroyed her cheating husband's empire had died down. People are always drawn to the next big scandal. Only peace remains permanent in this house. Apex Materials continued to thrive. I took up floral arrangement classes. On weekends, I cooked elaborate meals I never had the time to attempt before. Kieran and Harper started 1st grade. On their first day, holding my little angel's hands as we walked through the bright school doors, watching their small backpacks bounce as they ran into their classroom, I knew I had won. Not against Vance or Blair. I had won against circumstances, against societal prejudice, and against my own weakness. 5 years ago, I proved that a discarded woman is not a dead woman. A man's betrayal is not a period at the end of a sentence. It is a fork in the road that forces you to become stronger, more fiercely independent. Money and status are not tools to show off or crush others. They are titanium shields used to protect your dignity and the people you love. I finished my coffee and walked back inside. A cheerful argument erupted between Kieran and Harper over a comic book. "Mom! Kieran hid my princess comic." "Did not. She shoved it under the table herself and is blaming me." I laughed, walking over to ruffle their hair. All right, my superheroes. Get dressed. Mom is taking you out for chicken wings. And then we're going to the Lincoln Park Zoo to see the giraffes." "Yay, Mom is the best," they cheered, tackling me in a hug. The bright morning sun streamed through the curtains, illuminating the 3 of us. Out there, beyond the glass, the world might be filled with deception, betrayal, and ruthless corporate warfare. But inside this house, under my absolute protection, there was only laughter, love, and eternal peace. That evening, the rain returned to Chicago, washing away the humid grime of the bustling week. Sitting quietly on the balcony, wrapping my hands around a warm mug of chamomile tea, I watched the headlights reflect in the puddles on the asphalt. All the hurricanes were locked outside. There was no room left in my soul for the memory of Vance. There wasn't even a flicker of schadenfreude regarding Blair's downfall. In their place was only a profound, buoyant tranquility. They say the best revenge is serving it cold. But I realize the ultimate retribution isn't revenge at all. It's profound, unbothered success. The past was once a jagged knife, but now it is just a faded scar. Looking back, the me from 5 years ago was just a fragile 25-year-old girl, weeping in a thunderstorm with 2 babies in her womb. But that storm didn't drown me. It forged the titanium woman I am today. I didn't wait for pity, and I didn't weaponize my children's hearts with hatred. I simply wiped my tears, gritted my teeth, and built my own empire. The rain outside finally stopped, leaving behind crisp, purified air. I smiled, looking out at the glittering Chicago skyline. Even if the sky had collapsed 5 years ago, today, the sun was shining exactly where I stood,